It's 2 o'clock.
We're live. All right. Welcome to the meeting of the Water Management Committee. So the meeting is 2 o'clock, and I'd like to call it to order. And with that, we'll start out with any public comments or committee comments. So if there's any public comments about water management? Nope, nothing. All right. Anyone's Groundwater Authority, discuss actions taken at the board meeting. Well, Chuck's not here to report, but and they had the closed session yesterday, so there's not a lot to report on it. Just basically what you saw, that they're discussing I believe the issue about the purchasing of water, and that was it. But no actions were taken that I know of. And that's basically all he had to report on that. As far as the previous meeting, I assume he'll give us a report at the next board meeting. Okay. Was
there anything of note at the previous meeting?
Not particularly. There was, except it was a bit chilly for Chuck up there, but not a lot to report there. I think one of the biggest discussions they had was that Chuck brought up was about considering reworking or repaying for the well work that was done at Heritage Village.
Okay.
So he asked that they look into that pretty thoroughly before they make a decision, but no decision's been made yet. Okay. That was probably the one thing I remember. But everything else it was a short meeting. Everything else was moving along pretty, typical thing. Let's approve and spend all this money, and let's hear from the more money we're getting and the more we're spending from the manager. And that's all that comes to mind when I see those meetings is how much money they're spending. But there wasn't a lot of progress made on a lot of things at that point.
Okay.
There was that one agenda item and I can't remember the name of the grant, but it was the board authorized staff to pursue funding through that grant for, I think it was shallow well mitigation.
That's right.
And something else I don't recall offhand.
Well mitigation and I can't remember. I remember the grant. It was.
And then you're right, coming up the next meeting on, February 8th, I think it is. The Heritage well will be on there, and I believe there'll be a staff report with a recommendation for the board to consider whether or not that's eligible for compensation. Right. And then I believe that Brown Armstrong will be attending virtually. There's I believe it was, they came back to the board for additional, I think it was $8,000 to complete the audit, and the board questioned the legitimacy of that request, wanted them to appear at the December meeting, which they didn't. So I believe they're supposed to show, or no, maybe it was January. So they're supposed to show up virtually in the February meeting to make their appeal for the additional.
And I thought they were having an issue with ironing out replenishment fee versus pumping fees and where they're going and things like that. So I think that was an issue why it's costing more money, and there's a lot more paperwork to go through to figure out what money's going where. Okay. And so that'll be interesting to see what their report says when it comes out. I'm not sure even when it will come out because they haven't authorized the money yet.
That's right.
Which, it could be another 2-3 months, at least. Exactly. I wish I could remember that grant you were talking about, that additional grant. It comes to mind now what it was. I just don't remember.
I know the one part of it was for shallow well mitigation program. And I guess I don't recall offhand what that other component was.
And I think and then they formally announced the Corps of Engineers or Army, helping with the pipeline alignment, and they never really identified what they'll be doing. They just says that it's a big thing. They're going to be helping us. Okay. So I don't know about that. So we'll keep you informed and we'll try to get more information.
Oh, and there is a PAC meeting tonight. Might just mention that.
That's right.
Tonight at 5 o'clock, City Hall.
And isn't Stantec doing a report?
Not at that meeting. No. The Policy Advisory Committee was supposed to look at the recommendations from Stantec, and how does that fold into the communication and engagement plan that was developed.
Okay.
That was the assignment for this month's meeting.
Does Stantec plan a final presentation?
Yeah. So I believe they just scheduled this yesterday. I think there's a planning committee meeting on February 9th, and that'll be ahead of our board meeting on the 13th. I did confirm last night, Stantec is going to be on the agenda for giving a report to the board
Okay.
on the progress of the facilitation services. Basically, a final report on what the feedback they've gotten and the results.
And they got the extension too, didn't they? I thought from,
Well, they did get an extension to the end of February. They had considered requesting an extension through March, but we had a call last week, and they don't think they need that extension.
okay.
So this will essentially wrap it up. Since the Water District was the proponent of the agreement or signed the agreement, they do need to report to the board the results of their findings, and going forward, any particular actions that could result as a result of the surveys they did. They did ask the planning committee to, if they hadn't already done it, to complete that online survey, and imagine they'll share the results of that.
Because I'm curious about when it comes to the Policy Advisory Committee tonight, they're going to make a decision on whether to incorporate what Stantec found into the community outreach. That's what it sounds like they're doing, if they're going to say, well, we're going to use this or not use it.
Yeah, Stantec made a presentation to the PAC in the December meeting, I believe it was. And then, as you know, the PAC had developed a communication engagement plan. And so purpose to see how you could meld those two together, if there's something as a result of the facilitation services and the surveys that were done that may factor into the communication engagement plan, discuss that and see if there's some changes that possibly need to be made.
Well, it might be an interesting meeting. I might try to attend tonight if I can, but just to see what they say about it. Maybe get a feel for if they're interested. I can't believe they won't be, but you never know what's going to happen. All right. Anything else? Anything about the public? On the Groundwater Authority.
Yeah, Mike Neal here. These are going to be repeats, but it's good to remind people about things, especially of this much importance to the valley. You may recall or may not, a certain citizen requested information from the GA via whatever committee or group they choose to use to update their imported pipeline water project costs, because the last one was done in 2019. And that would be myself. And as I said before, I'm in the process and I have now completed a spreadsheet, which I'm going to put some additional information on just for those who may not be spreadsheet savvy or may not even have spreadsheets or whatever, even down to your little old man who's never had a computer who can understand if it gets printed out for him, what the kind of costs are going to be to their household for this imported water pipeline project. To date, of course, as I fully expected, to get zero response. No response from that formal request, stated in public as to whether they're going to do anything or not. And no response from a prominent TAC committee member as to whether the TAC is even responsible for generating that, even though I pointed out there was in their report in 2019 that was put out with the numbers in it. So if the water district could press for that, it'd be highly appreciated. I think that the district would help do the citizens a service, seeing as how the best possible numbers for the AVEC pipeline come out to around $100 a month of cost to the average household. And I don't know anybody that's going to be real happy about that, seeing as how we had a bunch of uproar just over new trash service that's just costing people about, let's say, $25 for a 3-month period. So if they don't like that, they sure won't like $100 a month. But, the GA is well practiced. And in both not listening, paying heed to requests or statements from citizens, or showing any sign that they think they need to practice any fiscal restraint. I wouldn't even want to try to estimate how much money they spent since their inception, but when they want to waste money on things like repeating the recycled wastewater treatment plan, come out with exactly the same conclusion the water district already did, and any high school kid would be able to figure out what was the best way to go. That's just one example. So, so be it. And as far as the GA itself, I'll continue to repeat myself. I think the GA needs to go away. The water district needs to become the GA. It's a joint agency. It's all it takes is an initiative law, which would readily be signed and get enough petition signatures, I'm quite sure. The citizens just could use a little help on the drafting of the initiative, and I don't see any reason why that couldn't be done by the district attorney or some other firm that's engaged. That's probably the hardest part of the process. Getting it voted in and put in place would simply be a matter of initiating new boundaries for the water district, which would encompass the basin, which would be part of the initiative. And at that point, you just get the signatures and you force the vote, and then you had the vote, and it's a done deal. And now people may still have to pay a lot of money, but at least they have to pay a lot of money through an agency that they're going to actually elect and put in place to do that job. And that's what's been sorely needed the entire time the GA's been in force.
Thanks, Mike.
If I could, I just remembered the second component of that grant application was water recycling, the new water treatment facility,
Oh, water treatment facility. Yeah.
funding for that, yeah, that's what it was.
But I'll remind, and Mike, I thank you for your spreadsheet, incidentally. If you listen to the meeting, the workshop the other day, we talked about our strategic plan. And what you're asking there is what something we're looking at as well, because it's going to be part of the strategic plan for long-term planning for the cost of the water district. If this thing happens, what's it's going to cost? And I've said this publicly, and I'll say it again, that even if, because the big laurels they're standing on is the government's going to pay for the pipeline and all the installation. And I've always said, even if somebody gives you the $200 million, even if they do, you still got to operate it. So remember in your spreadsheet, you have, actually there's three types of costs that are the operating of it. You have one is the operation of the system itself and maintenance, the electrical, the keeping kind of pipelines, the whatever it may be, including flushing lines that, when water sits in them a while. I mean, Chuck Griffin brings up a good point. When water sits for a long time, you may have to flush the lines because of bacteria and everything else. So all that has to take into account in operation and maintenance. Then you have what's called the fixed maintenance cost that you pay to the water supplier, whoever you purchase it from. And that's a yearly cost based on the amount of water you purchase, whether you get the water or not. And that number needs to be determined. And the final number you have is when you actually do purchase the water, what are you paying for it when you actually get it? So there's three components to that cost. And so even if you were to assume that cost is about $11 or $12 million a year, that's equivalent to the size of another water district. So you're on the right track with that, but I wanted to remind you that the simplification of the cost you're looking at that you got from their charts, it's a little bit more involved. But I can assure you that our strategic plan has to look at those things so we can plan down the road what it's going to cost to run this district. And, make some assumptions. If the pipeline goes in, and this is what it's going to cost our ratepayers. So I appreciate you looking at that stuff, and you're right about the money. A lot of it's being spent. I look at one thing about money being spent. I just look at what the water district has contributed in pumping fees and replenishment fees, which is in the neighborhood of $5 or $6 million total between the two right now, maybe $7. And that's just what we've contributed, not counting all the grant money they're spending and the other people. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So just to comment on what you just said, just a little insight. The numbers that are on the spreadsheet are all either from the water district, because there's a couple of numbers there, from the district or from the GA. None of those numbers are numbers that I've made up other than an assumption of the assumed inflation since 2019, which is changeable by anybody who wants to use a spreadsheet, and the financing cost in far as rate and time of the amortization of the loan. So we strategized with several people who gave me feedback and they said, we don't want to be making up anything, and have the, GA say, well, you just made that number up, so that's their numbers, and the press is on to push them to update the numbers, which time the numbers for inflation will go off. Just, you set to zero and then you've taken it off. It's real easy. But until then, you have to do something that's actually reasonable and not this, what I think is phony baloney, which is, has already been thrown out to the public in a prior meeting by their general manager saying, oh, it's only going to cost you $30 a month. Well, that doesn't even cover the pipeline O&M and service costs, as seen easily on the spreadsheet. So that was the approach with the spreadsheet with the numbers.
Anything else?
Not for me.
All right, on to brackish water.
Okay, the Brackish Water Study Group's last meeting was almost a year ago to the day, January 27th last year. Just to bring you up to date, the annual reports for 2019, 2020, and 2021 have been submitted to DWR. The 2019 report was submitted on December 9th, and the 2020 and 2021 reports were uploaded on January 17th. We did receive payment for the fifth invoice package. That was in the amount of $8,521.53. That was received on January 11th. The grant agreement has been amended, and DWR approved extending the completion date from March 30th of 2023 to December 30th of 2023. So recent work that's going on involved developing draft treatment methods and costs for 4 different scenarios. The scenarios involve water of the quality that we encountered from Neal Ranch 1 Deep Well NR1D, which of course had the high boron content and high TDS. One scenario is a pilot scale project, and the other is a full scale project at 5,000 acre feet a year. And then the other 2 scenarios involve water of the quality that was conducted by the Corallo district test, like 3,000 parts per million. So currently working on those scenarios are being reviewed, and also costs for additional system components such as the extraction wells, pipelines, reservoirs, those sorts of things are being estimated. Also at this time, putting together the 2022 annual report to submit to DWR.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Is there, so what's the next step? Like you said, could it be a pilot project, or is it all depend on finding a location for brackish water that's acceptable? Is that what it all boils down to?
Well, as I said, right now they're looking at 4 scenarios. One with the lower quality water, the cost of that, and then with the better quality water. Obviously, the criteria that we needed for establishing where the test was to be conducted, not all those criteria could be met because, as you know, most of the brackish water is on the base, and we weren't allowed access onto the base. So we had to go back and look at an area that check as many boxes as possible. That was at Neal Ranch well, and it was made available by Mojave Pistachio. But again, the test results from the water that was sampled from that deep well had high boron, high TDS, so it's not ideal. Again, look at the cost for treating that poor quality water, and then costs for treating the better quality water, such as what was in the Corallo test, and then see if we can't find a location. This would wrap up the initial feasibility study, and depending on the results of these scenarios, the costs and such, we could submit another grant proposal for a pilot scale.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
But of course, you have to have identify the area where that would be.
Is that the intention? Is that where what a group's trying to head to, is to be able to identify a spot so they can proceed with another grant for a pilot project?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And I guess the other question I have about this, is the group willing to share? I think they probably would. Are there other people that might be interested in where you are now in this technology? And that includes the base, because we know there's a number of military bases in the United States that have gone to brackish water recovery. And it may be something they're considering, or Searles Valley. I don't know whether they have brackish water they could put through. But what I'm saying is, what's been developed here, even though it may not happen here in our valley, what if it was to happen with someone else who drew water from our valley? You see what I'm getting at? So if Searles Valley was to put it in, then all of a sudden they're producing their own water, and they don't have to take the 1,700 acre feet a year. Or if the base did it themselves, then they sort of come off our water supply because they're producing it. is the technology there if they're interested? Are they Cerros Valley participates with you in this, do they not, at this point?
Cerros Valley is participating as part of the study group, yes.
Okay, but not the Navy?
No, the Navy initially was, but they withdrew
Okay,
a long time ago.
all right. Because the hope down the line is that we look at other alternatives that could bring water to help the valley out, and one of them, you know, would be this technology or this type of brackish water recovery actually handled by the government itself on the base. And although whether they would accept everything these guys have done is a groundwork, I don't know. But that was a question I was asked by somebody. Hey, if this group doesn't pan out here, is it something they could pass all this on to the Navy to do?
Well, one of the, when the Navy was still participating and this project was being conceived, there was some talk about being able to test it within the base boundary. There was concern about subsidence.
Right.
So that was the condition that they said, is that test it outside the fence first, and see
Okay.
what happens, and then if they might consider it, but that was under different leadership.
Yeah, but I guess, but the fact is, if you do test it outside the fence and you find out it's feasible for a particular cost, then you have a product, I guess, that might be more interesting. And once you test it, that's the key. Yeah,
It would depend on how that's received by the Navy, yes.
right, and it depends on who's,
And
you know, at the
again,
time.
leadership has changed since
Changing all the
then,
time.
who knows?
All right. All right. Hey,
Mike Neal again, let me show my ignorance on this particular project. Everything I've heard about this brackish water study, has been stated that the state would never look at this as a new source of water. It would still be, well, you know, you're pulling out 2 acre-feet out of your brackish water and treating it and using it, that's 2 acre-feet of, I'm sorry, out of your allocation. You know, barring some change in philosophy or viewpoint by the state to get this brackish water that's whatever's made usable out of it to be looked at as new water, new source, some kind of a recharge source. I've always wondered, you know, what would be the benefit? Anybody got input on that?
Yes. So if the state won't consider it, you're right, you're correct. The state's not going to consider that new water. But if you're pumping, though you have the base is fairly complicated, and there's pools of brackish water and pools of fresh water, but they're not completely isolated from each other. So if you're pumping fresh water from a particular area and there's a nearby brackish water in storage, it can migrate into the fresh water as the table drops and contaminate the fresh water, eventually making it so brackish you
Oh.
can't use it.
Okay.
So it's about trying to keep the brackish water from, yeah, you get it.
I got you now. I missed that one.
That's an excellent, that's a great question, and that's really the only reason to go after the brackish water. That makes much sense to me anyhow.
Well, another benefit of the brackish project is, and I remember this was when the cooperative group was still active, but the State Water Board, Lahontan, required basins to do salt nutrient management plans. So pumping the brackish water would assist in removing salts from the basin. So yeah, that's another side benefit of a project.
Okay.
As Director Kaczynski has pointed out before, the byproducts from the purification process have to be treated as if they're toxic waste and either stored or disposed of appropriately.
that's what makes it so expensive on the last pilot project the Water District did, is you got to get down to a pile of dust and then treat that as hazardous waste. And to get that short distance from potable water to zero outflow is very, very expensive. But this project is looking at it a different way, with somebody actually interested in acquiring the highly brackish side stream.
Boron, for example.
Yeah.
Right. No, I've heard people claim that the Searles Valley would be willing to acquire the salts off of the treatment, and I have no idea if that's actually the case or not.
I don't know.
Nope.
I've heard that too, I don't know.
Okay.
So COSO as well, I was interested, is geothermal.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
well, maybe you should
Yeah,
quit.
so that's the way the project is headed, and that's why I think it has a big plus. But one thing that Mike is saying, I agree with, I don't know if the state will consider that new water. They're gonna consider it new water, I've been told. I haven't seen that in writing. I don't know the exact answer to that.
Nothing I've heard
I'm
from them
assuming that a lot of
suggests-
people will fight for the fact that it's not new water, it still comes out of your aquifer. However, if we could get is the Navy interested in doing it, where they come off of the freshwater aquifer. If we get them interested in doing it, I'm not sure the state has a lot of say in what they do. Yeah. So, I mean, there's all kinds of options out there, so I appreciate it. All right. Is that it, Don? Anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're done, or yes, there's more?
Yes, I'm done.
Yes, you're done.
There's no more.
There is no more. Alternate water sources, exploration of subbasin within the valley. You guys are gonna have to update me on that a little bit if anything's going on. And
Yeah, this was originally approved at the January 19th workshop last year, and the board approved up to $200,000 for obtaining and reprocessing the remote sensing seismic data that was collected during the 1980s within the El Paso subbasin, and to use that to update the hydrological conceptual model. So the acquisition and the interpretation of the 104 miles of seismic data has been completed by John Jansen of Collier Geophysical. John has drafted a final report, but after we had a discussion between John, Tim Parker, and myself, it was decided that John should include in his report a called net clay, determination of net clay percentages, along with the net sand that he had already done, because clay can contain some amount of water, groundwater. So that work is in progress right now before the report is completed.
okay. Yeah, I saw some of the line items for cost. You're paying for faults. You know, you're paying for a true extension picture of what the fault looks like. It sounds strange to me. I think it'd be common, not common, but you think it'd be public because it's in the ground. But somebody actually owns that. So we're still moving ahead on that. Good. All right. And one thing I want to bring up, I've heard, and someone can straighten me out right now, the fact that you have somebody in Searles Valley is trying to poke some holes in the ground for fresh water. Is that true or false? That I think it was the Barker brothers. Have you heard that at all? That they're looking?
I know they have drilled 2 wells.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if they plan to drill more, but I know that.
Do we know
for a
anything
fact.
about them?
They claim that they are capable, between the 2 wells, they're capable of producing what Searles has historically pumped on an annual basis of somewhere around 2,200 acre feet. And the water quality is supposed to be very good.
That's pretty important information. Is there anybody at Searles Valley that because I know Blanchard's gone now, isn't he, over there?
I talked to Sean himself. I mean, he's the one that told me the information that,
I mean,
it surprised me because the wells are drilled up in the area of the ACE plant.
Yeah, East
you know
Coast
where that is.
Generation, yeah.
And you worked in Trona, you know the golf course wells.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
the quality of that water
Yeah.
was not very high.
So
So to be relatively close to that golf course well field and have so-called pristine potable water and that much flowing, I'm surprised, but Sean seems to believe they've drilled into some sort of channel that feeds from the
Argus,
over the Argus Range.
Oh, so I'm sorry, where is the golf course?
if you go,
It's within the Trona plant.
Yeah,
It was used for utilities to in the coal pile, keep dust down and such.
it's about 2 miles
water.
past the Trona plant on the right-hand side of the highway, and sometimes you'll see it out there. You can actually see it from the highway where the old pool used to be, and
That's Valley Wells.
that's Valley Wells, but isn't the
That's Valley,
golf
golf
course just
course
behind
wells
that?
are in the Trona plant themselves.
Oh, is
Up
it?
by the coal pile.
Is it that close?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking the golf course.
No,
that,
the Valley Wells was one brackish system, then we had the golf course system, which was within the plant.
Okay.
Valley Wells
I
used
guess
to
they
fill
call
the
it the golf course.
firefighting reservoir, yes?
Pardon me?
The Valley Wells filled the firefighting reservoir, which used to be the Trona Pool.
Used to be the swimming
Okay.
pool, yeah, right.
But the golf course one was,
And I believe it was called Golf Course Wells because at one point there was a golf course within the plant.
Okay, hence my confusion. I don't
Yeah,
remember
golf course in Trona.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I understand it because the official Trona golf course
Is-
as
that's
it
what I was
exists
thinking.
is out by the airport
Okay.
there, yeah.
Lots of sand traps, but not a lot of.
You have to
green.
carry your own little green with you, yeah.
so
off of
I
it.
guess where I'm headed with that is that something that we can encourage, get behind with Searles
I'm
Valley?
sure.
Something that I'm sure they would,
I'm sure if there's that amount of water available to them that
they're gonna start dropping.
but
off.
they have to negotiate with the Barker, with Sean Barker.
Yeah, those guys
And-
seem
and
to always
they're-
fall into pots of gold.
and that relationship isn't on the best footing.
Okay,
So, well, because, little history, that when they tried to put in the initial well, they wanted to get a they wanted to get a well serve first from
Right.
Shields Valley Minerals for water supply. My understanding was it was issued by the Searles Domestic Water Company, but then the company decided to pull it. And so that, Barker went off and drilled his own well because he didn't get the well serve. And this well turned out to be allegedly a good well, producing a lot of water, high-quality water. So,
is it near the mouth of a canyon?
You know where the Ace Cogeneration
it would be
plant was, right?
down,
Yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't be right next to the canyon, but yeah.
So fresh water does come down the canyons and goes into the sand. Anything in the flats is
I think it's near the
highly
cemetery. Somewhere up
Okay,
there, yeah.
all right.
So
But-
to your point, I mean, if there's that amount of water available, I would think Searles Valley Minerals would be interested in approaching.
And of course, I assume that they wouldn't be announcing anything they're working on or doing because of everything that's going on with any lawsuits or anything else they have going on, I assume. So, and then plus they're probably waiting on the adjudication. But it's just interesting. I heard that, and I heard he had one well, then I heard two. I heard it was good water and a
As
good
far as I
flow.
know, they have two for sure, and I don't know that they have plans to drill any more, but I do know that they do have two wells.
It could be good news, you know, maybe he's gonna sell it to them and then they'll end up selling their water up here. Getting to be expensive.
Well, that's a
But
shorter
that-
pipeline run.
Yeah, if it's real and he didn't hit just a pocket that's just there briefly and then gone. How long's he had the wells, do you know?
How long has,
How long's he had the wells in the ground?
the first well has probably been a couple of years. I don't know when they drilled the second well.
Wow.
I've heard about that first well for some time now, and as
Yeah.
I said, I questioned the quality and the amount that it could pump, just from experience with the golf course well field.
Well, let's hope that,
Yeah, I mean,
That's good, and if
Good,
not,
good for them if it works out.
right, good for them if it works out.
Yeah. That's all I had on that particular alternate water source, unless anybody else has anything.
No.
Nothing? All right. Future agenda items, anything you want to talk about, Dave, or anybody want on here? Nope.
Not for me, thank you.
All right. With that, I will adjourn the meeting. It looks like from here, 2:30?
2.
2:32?
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to do that.